sacrifice. The theme of Amphoreus that has consistently reared its ugly head to hammer home the point that this story is going to hurt. But in a good way. Never did I think that it was possible for my predictions to be so spot on and some completely wrong. With a wild card thrown in there that I didn't even know I had been foreshadowing this entire time. Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about, and I have so many theories lined up for you guys, but first, we gotta do some recapping. Because a lot has happened this patch, and many split up plot points have converged into one, and yet is still very easy to get lost with the point of view constantly shifting and foreshadowing all over the place and lore bombs being dropped everywhere, leaving craters that could impact the entire universe as we know it. So let's get into this. Because this is the end of the flame chase explained. Okay, so let's start off with the flesh and blood of the flame chase, the stoic, misunderstood leader with nothing but love and dedication in her heart, Lady Aglaia. And like I predicted, she met her end this patch in the very way I predicted, no less. In a short, it was my prediction that her final bath was in her golden blood, which did happen. She was stabbed and fell into the pool. Then her divinity passed as she was saving us from Aquila's final gambit, that I also predicted in this video. But my accuracy aside, it was the passing of Aglaia that made us realize just how paramount she was to the flame chase and keeping Akima safe. Her golden threads prevented crime, the black tide, and many other threats from touching the holy city. Yet she was taken for granted by all simply because she lived for so long. And her once unbreakable golden threads becoming thin and weak, revealing the gaps in her network of information, slowly blinding her to the actions of the cleaners, which does explain how Lygus claimed that he could sever her golden threads, because as someone who at least claims to be able to see souls, he knew how weak her soul was becoming and by proxy her golden threads. But nonetheless, Aglaia, with nothing but her divinity remaining, requested that Cartonus place her divinity and the last of her soul in this bracelet for Phainon to wear, a bracelet that ended up saving us from plummeting into the golden lava, and with the last of her strength spent, she fell into the lava unable to save herself and had her final bath in warm and radiant gold for the second time. But how did we get into this situation? Well, this is where we have to shift our focus to the Trailblazers' point of view to focus on little Ika's retainer. I'm kidding. None other than our new demigod of the sky, Miss Hyacine. And this girl went through a lot in this story. And for the sake of explaining to you guys the intense level of foreshadowing that happened in the story, we gotta talk about her first before we get to Cipher. So, with Hyacine, we follow her as she convenes with her ancestors and gains their approval, only for it never to matter at all. Because her world would shatter as her lifelong hero would turn into a villain she herself would have to surpass. Because after one of the biggest lore nukes we've gotten so far, we learned that the sun folk and the rain folk of the distant past were at odds with each other over the dumbest things I have ever seen. They literally fight and kill each other over what they think their god's favorite weather is, never considering the fact that their god didn't care about their opinions at all. And the fact that they kept the sky cloudless was entirely unrelated to their prayers, giving rise to a Chrysos heir, a pure-hearted girl named Celiosi, born with ties to both factions and golden blood on top of it all. So not only was she rejected by both sides, she was also exiled because golden blood was seen as a curse at that time. The Amphoreus people will never cease to amaze me with just how ugly they can be. Anyway, Celiosi, banished to the wild, still finding her people blameless, met two companions by the name of Solibus and Lunibus, who pledged to stay by her side forever. And after years of witnessing the heinous acts of both the sun and rain folk, she decided that the problem wasn't them, but the god they looked up to. This corroborated by the divine punishment incident with the curse of going beyond the sky. So as the golden-blooded hunter she was, she raised her sword to the sky itself, aiming to put an end to the god that she thought was the cause of her people's actions. But this was her innocence, because though she succeeded in her goal of slaying Aquila, she found that Aquila wasn't the cause of her people's actions at all. In fact, the worship of Aquila was the sole reason the people weren't tearing each other apart in the first place. And this broke Celiosi's heart, because she realized for the first time that she was wrong. The problem was the sky folk as a whole, and after Aquila's fall, she witnessed the people savagely and mindlessly slaughtering each other. So with no other option available to her, she revived Aquila and fused her soul with the Titans, very similar to how Anaxa did, to give the people a Titan to worship again, accomplishing nothing but gaining insight that highlighted just how naive she was this entire time, because she realized that the absence of rain wasn't due to favoritism, but the black tide, because as we know, the black tide came from beyond the sky. Remember how I suggested that Aquila was afraid of something? Turns out that the black tide was that thing, and the sky was the first line of defense. So realizing this and then casting her newly enlightened eyes at the skyfolk, Seleuce was disgusted with the mortals that she dedicated her existence to protecting, because they had only gotten worse, making war with each other over if they would worship Seleuce or Aquila, which is just as stupid because they are one now. And with the Titan's divinity putting a strain on her already damaged sense of faith in humanity, Seleuce went numb and gave up on humanity as a whole, still pledging to fight the Black Tide, but at the same time commanded Solibus and Lunibus to cast judgment on the unrighteous skyfolk, executing all of them but one Chrysos heir that pleaded for her life, appealing to the last ember of humanity remaining in Seleuce to let her live so that she could show her that humanity could unite under a common goal. And this unnamed Chrysos heir would survive to be Hyacine's forgotten ancestor. Now, with her family legacy and image of her lifelong hero shattered right in front of her, Hyacine made a choice. She made a choice that she no longer wanted to be Seleuce. She wanted to be the opposite. Instead of cleansing the world by slaying the unrighteous, her goal was to bring healing to this fractured world, setting the example of compassion and unity that she wishes for everyone to follow. Understanding that humans are flawed and always will be, but in the end, humans will always come together when it counts. And that fact proved to be the downfall of Seleuce and Aquila. And now, we gotta talk about the thief who stole the show this patch, none other than the real carrier of the flame chase, the cat girl from the long lost city of Dolos, Cipher. And Cipher's story begins as a poor kid on the streets forced to resort to a life of crime in order to survive. Very similar to another cat girl story, and oh yeah, her too. Anyway, Hoyo's obsession with street rat cat girls aside, Cipher attempts to sell her stolen goods to Aglaia, who curiously can't tell if she's lying or telling the truth. Not sure how she managed this, since I don't think she was a demigod at this point. But either way, Aglaia scams her right back by giving her a nice but not at all enchanted pair of boots, and Cipher comes back banged up, so Aglaia ends up taking her in, seeing that she had golden blood, probably also realizing that she could be the future demigod of trickery. And as time passes, Cipher grows up and does indeed end up conning Zagreus out of his core flame and assumes the authority of trickery. She then attempts her biggest heist yet, stealing the fragmented piece of the Dawn device from Dawn Cloud. So in order to infiltrate the church, she disguised herself as a priest and overheard something absolutely terrifying. She heard that the Dawn device was only supposed to last for 300 years, meaning that the flame chase was on a timer that absolutely no one was ready for. So in a stroke of pure cunning, Cipher announced to everyone that the Dawn device would last forever. A grand lie that her authority of trickery made a reality, purely because she got enough people to believe it, giving the flame chase a new timer that would only expire upon her death. But this came at a price, because she had to keep this lie, which meant severing all ties with Aglaia, who would inevitably figure her out with enough prying, so she had to run and keep her distance from the one person who ever showed her kindness. And as painful as this was, it was her duty, and without anyone knowing it, she carried the entire flame chase with her very existence. But knowing that the journey was nearly done, she sacrificed herself to buy Phainon and everyone time, one last time, to reclaim the last core flame, stealing and concealing the core flame of world bearing inside of Bartolos, who ended up being Zagreus this entire time. Thus was the end of the thief who saved the world with a lie. And that is where we meet the to be continued. But Nova, you say, what happened to this foreshadowing you mentioned earlier? Well, here's where things get interesting. Because we saw Selioci, the heroic warrior of pure heart who aimed to save her people with the death of a titan, only for her innocence to turn into cold apathy afterwards. I wonder who else fits this description. Oh yeah, Phainon, the guy who throughout the story has been slowly tearing at the seams, changing from an optimistic happy-go-lucky hero to a despondent survivor, wondering if the goal his friends died for is even worth it. He is following the same path as Selioci. Phainon's entire goal from the very beginning was to protect those and what he cared about. Yet in the end, it is everyone he knows and loves dying to save him. This isn't what he wanted, and it's gnawing away at his soul. So throughout the story, as the losses compound, he starts to lose all hope and all emotion, even pushing us away as he pushes forward to the vortex of Genesis alone, leaving Tribi, Maide, and Trinan behind, all sacrificing themselves for him. But as Phainon said himself, his soul was gone when he lost Aedes Elysiae, but it was his companions that built him back up again. And now they left one by one. And now as they died one by one, a piece of Phainon also died with them one by one. And now he is nothing but the empty shell he used to be, with his innocence and optimism turning bitter as reality dawns on him, just like Selioci. Now that is foreshadowing. But we've still got one last thing to talk about. You guys know the deal, because Hoyo just supported your boy's signature theory once again. The in-game paths theory that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, but I'll explain it real quick for the people in the back. It is my belief that the in-game paths characters are assigned to matter, meaning that they have two paths, a lore path and an in-game one, with the lore path being whatever faction they are affiliated with, and the in-game one reflecting a major aspect of the character's life. I have been able to connect many characters to their in-game paths so far, and the Amphoreus cast is no different. So let's start with Hyacine, who technically should be abundance. Even from a gameplay standpoint, she's literally just Ling Sha. But she isn't. And you know why? It's because her whole story is intertwined with memories. Celioci's legacy was a memory. Her talking to her ancestors, memories. Solibus and Lunibus, memories. Her whole entire side of the quest was geared around her finding out who she really was and who her hero really was, all of which revolved around memories. And that is just the most remembrance thing ever. And if you think Hyacine made it easy, let's talk about Cipher, because Hoyo might as well just outright say my theories right at this point, because Cipher's life was always riddled with doubt. Doubt in herself and if her ability to lie and trick people mattered, or if it could save anyone or change anything. And her whole story was her quest to find out if she did in fact matter at all. And she ends up being Nihility in the same way Jiaoqiu and Kafka are Nihility, the two characters that struggle with the idea of their actions not mattering, but wanting to believe that they do. So Cipher very easily fits the bill by struggling with the idea of not, making her a perfect fit for the Nihility type. Alright, so now that we are all on the same page with the story and my in-game paths theory has been vindicated once again, I think it is safe to say that this is the end of the flame chase explained. This is definitely not the end of the things we need to talk about, though. I didn't even touch on Lygus or March 7th or Rupert, who I ended up foreshadowing this entire time by mentioning him so often, not to mention the Lord Ravager we are still clueless about. But, of course, I've got some ideas. So I am so hyped to talk about this new patch that I kept screaming from the rooftops, "Let Hoyo cook!" And oh boy, are we feasting. I will never forget those people who claimed Amphoreus was a failure in the beginning. But just so you know, I called it from the start. I knew this story would be good. I knew Amphoreus was a resetting world. I called that back in January, and I called nearly every single Flame Chaser's death before it even happened with near perfect accuracy. And I am merely a patch away from predicting the entire plot from the very beginning. And you will only get this type of accuracy right here. But what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.